Hey, how's it going? I'm Pure, and today I'm going to be with my buddy Joesby, and we're going to talk about the newest RWBY episode, or things that have past happened as well. Since we are first members, there is going to be spoilers, because this is, I believe, Chapter 10, am I correct?
I think so.
I think this is Volume 4, Chapter 10. So, we are going to be a week ahead of YouTube in talking about these, and Joesby, you want to talk about a lot, so start it off. What do you want to talk about
Oh
first?
my god, there's so much to talk about, dude. Okay, so I was writing down notes. So before we watched this episode, we went back and we watched a couple of the past episodes, and then we watched this newest episode. And I've been taking notes this whole time on things that I wanted to cover in this video. And when I got to this chapter 10 episode, uh, the biggest thing I wrote down was semblance.
Right.
And then I had to underline it several times because it. So, Ren's semblance is finally revealed because we start talking about his backstory. And it seems like he has some kind of he gains the ability to stay calm in certain situations, especially in battle and whatnot. But also, we learn that he can spread it to other people when touching them, which is huge. We've been wondering what Ren's semblance is for the longest time, and it's finally revealed in his backstory episode. Oh, it was so good, and it's so dark and touching.
Yes, it was a very emotional episode, to say the least.
Uh, and then we go and we find out that towards the end, there's a connection between his backstory and the Shion village incident, it was chapter 2 of this season, where they found a dead huntsman in the village that was attacked by quote unquote bandits and Grimm. And I guess, but before we get into more of that, let's talk about, they found this footprint, right? The huntsman there dies, and then while Ren is looking around, he finds this footprint, and it was in chapter 9, the very end of chapter 9, when RWBY, Jean, Nora, and Ren split up into their two groups. RWBY and Jean go down a completely different path, and while they're walking, it pans out and shows that same footprint on their path. Alec, you have any input on that? Or
No,
anything?
I feel like you're leading into something. That's why I'm kind of sitting here listening.
Okay, alright. That was just kind of a side thing. I don't really know what that's about. I don't know if it might have to do with the Grimm, probably. We're wondering if the elephant-like Grimm is going to be a big thing that team, whether you want to call them Team Junior or Team Ranger. I personally like Ranger better.
Rangers.
But if they end up fighting these elephant Grimm that were shown in season 2, I believe.
I can't remember too far back because you recently watched like the entire thing again. I haven't.
Yeah,
I watched it once and called it there.
it was when Team RWBY was with Professor, what's his name? Green hair, glasses.
Ublek, I believe.
Yeah.
Is it Ublek?
Dr. Ublek. They went on this thing out in like a ruined city, which they end up finding Torchwick and his band of criminals. But before that, they run into several Grimm, and one of the things they cover is the elephant Grimm, which I think that footprint. Oh no! I just realized something.
All right, go on.
That's the footprint of the giant, like, horse grim thing
That was just shown in this
that we
episode?
just saw in this past episode. Oh no. Oh, sorry. I just made a connection.
So this entire time you've been talking about this one thing leading up to it, and then at the very end of it, you're like, "Oh shit, I'm wrong."
Yeah. Do we want to cut that out?
Nah, man, this is open discussion. We're just gonna go with it.
Okay.
Nothing's gonna get cut unless it's like, serious. Like that, like the cat meowing. That would be a big thing that we should probably cut out real quick. All right, go on.
All right, we good?
Yeah, we good.
Okay. So another thing that happened at the end of chapter 9 was a Crow. He was saying, "Ty, she's not coming, Ty." The only person that we could probably think that this is referring to is Yang's dad. When he says Ty, of course. But she's not coming. I think he's talking about Raven.
That's what I thought, yeah.
I think he's saying that, like, Raven's not going to come in and do anything about it, and Raven might just let Crow die. Which I've been talking to a bunch of my friends, of course. Like, I usually watch these episodes with my friends who are not Alec, and then we talk about things, of course, after the episode.
Yeah, I'm the one who gets left out on this. I'm the loner.
I'm sorry, dude. But it's unfortunate. I love Crow to pieces, right? Crow is my second favorite character in this whole show, and we've all pretty much come to the conclusion that he's probably going to die. Like, he's probably not going to be miraculously saved.
Which is very sad. And it's very sad to think.
And there are a couple of reasons for that. One of them being RWBY really hasn't, like, experienced any kind of, like, traumatic event that would really, develop her character more. Like, we've had the whole fall at Beacon and stuff like that, but she doesn't have a personal connection that's been severed.
Penny, though. I mean,
yeah, kind of. But she hasn't really shown any setback because of it.
True.
Like, it was one of the things that helped trigger her whole Silver Eyes thing. But, like, with Jean, he lost someone who was really close to him. And now he's, he's really developing as a character. Weiss, she has her whole thing where she's just lost, her whole Eris thing. She's being suppressed by her father, and, she's making strides to become stronger because of that. Yang lost her arm. Blake, going back and seeing her family after the whole kind of being the purpose and the reason for Yang being attacked. So she has to deal with the White Fang and blah, blah, blah. Well, RWBY doesn't really have that same thing. And we think Crow's going to be it, because Crow is the person she based her weapon off of, because he has, his sword turns into the whole scythe thing. So her favorite Uncle Crow, if he were to die, that would be a really big thing for her. But also, with Chapter 8, Crow kind of gave up all of the information that he had. And when characters do that, it's like they become less useful as a character. And so that is probably the setup for his death, because he's no longer needed.
It is really sad to think that, because Crow is a character that is loved by many. Crow,
he's so cool.
Yeah, Crow is a very good and likable character, but I see where you're coming from with he gives up all of his information, which normally in most stories do end up leading to their inevitable death. So it is very depressing to think that Crow might be dying in one of these coming episodes.
I really don't. I really like, as much as it makes sense, I really
There's
don't
that
want it to
hope where you
happen.
don't want it to
Like,
happen.
yeah, just like go kill Senpai. uh, um, the in chapter 8, the one thing that he doesn't say, like Ruby says, is there anything, or was it Ruby or Nora? I don't remember. Someone says, is there anything else uh you want to tell us?
That would be
And
Ruby
Crow's
that
just
says it.
like, yeah. And Crow says, not tonight. So maybe there's something that he'll say later on before his death, and I hope that if he is gonna die, that he goes out in a fucking bang.
Well, I mean,
Because
there is a possibility though, because okay, so when he says not tonight, he does look over to the tree, and I'm not for sure if it was a crow or a raven that honestly flew down.
I think it's Raven.
That's what I'm saying, and that's why I don't think he said anything else, is because he knew that's probably Raven. Yeah. That's just sitting there.
I almost 100% I think it's Raven, because that Raven or Crow, I don't know for sure, but it has these very piercing red eyes, and when Raven is finally introduced to us, like she actually shows up, though the waitress at the bar says, "From the woman with the red eyes." And if we've learned anything from the show, eyes
mean a lot.
Are extremely important. So important. They're important with Oscar, they're important with Ruby, they're important with the butler, and then they're important with Tyrion. Alec, why don't you're the one who pointed this one out, so why don't you explain that one a little bit?
Alright, so it was either, believe it was chapter 8, when the fight between Tyrion and Crow ends up breaking out. And during this entire dialogue that Tyrion had been speaking, and during the entire fight, Tyrion's eyes were yellow. Up until the point that Tyrion strikes Crow with his tail, and I guess quote-unquote poisons him. We can just assume that he was poisoned at this point. But then it pans back over to Tyrion, and his eyes are now purple, which is kind of the same color as the poison that was basically coming out of Crow towards the beginning. What was it, chapter... Was it the end? Yeah, no, it'd be towards the end of chapter 9.
Or the fight was chapter 7.
Was it 7? I don't know.
Towards the end, where Crow coughs up his blood or poison or whatever it is, that's chapter 8.
But the eyes change colors, then Ruby cuts off the tail, and his eyes go back to being yellow. So, my theory is he can control whether or not that tail really injects poison. Or at least that was kind of my take on that. Because we literally just watched these, I think, past 4 episodes back to back. And I hadn't noticed it the first time. It was that second time that we watched that I noticed it.
Yeah. I think that was a really good catch. I had watched the series over. I'd watched it the first time and then like watch it over again, and then I watched these past couple episodes again. But it wasn't until like this time I would have never caught it. That was a good catch, and that's just kind of another thing that reinforces the idea that a character's eyes mean a lot. It goes a long way in describing that character.
I want to stop you for a second because you had mentioned Oscar, and during the time that we were watching these, you said that you had a theory that also a lot of other people had the theory with as well. And I'm curious, since I don't look up these theories as much as you do or really think too much into it, I want to hear what this theory is about Oscar and I guess Ozpin.
Okay. I will want to go back and talk about Raven for a minute, but for right now, let me talk about Ozpin and this whole theory. I've been coming up with, like, I first originally came up with this theory, I think after I watched through the show the first time, and that was before Volume 4 was even released. and I'm not going to say that I'm the founder of this theory because I've looked online and I haven't posted anything or anything like that, but I've seen other people come up with the same theory, and I think it's a very well thought out theory. I think it's definitely viable. So the whole discussion between Ozpin and he first tells Pyrrha about it, and then in this past episode, Chapter 8, Crow talks to Team Ranger about it. The whole not just Fall Maiden, but all of the maidens in general, right? So the maidens have this thing where after they die, the last person they think about, or I guess that wouldn't really apply in this situation, but whatever, like their soul becomes bonded to the next person, right?
Right.
And there is somewhere along the line, it wasn't an actual episode. They do talk about it a little bit, but there is an actual like whole backstory episode like the World of Remnant episodes.
Mm-hmm.
It's probably somewhere on Rooster Teeth's channel on YouTube. But
they stopped uploading Remnant. Like, there's not too many episodes of Remnants.
They didn't?
Yeah, it's just like there's some weeks where it cuts off and then there's no episode at all.
Well, I'm pretty sure it has this backstory episode because I never watched it through, like, because I didn't watch on Rooster Teeth's channel when I first watched this show, so it wasn't there. But you can find an episode where it explains the backstory of the Fall Maidens and how they came to be in the first place. And the whole deal with that is that there's this wizard living out by himself, and these four maidens, four girls, assist him and help him out. And so he uses his wizard power to create the maidens and give them the powers to help other people to create and do all these wonderful things. I think Ozpin is the wizard. I think the wizard has that same ability where he can pass down his soul to like the next person, and then he just, continues to live on through that. And I started coming up with this theory after Volume 3 because Ozpin knew a lot about the maidens. And he had to explain it to the other like big hunters and huntresses, like Ironwood and Crow and whatnot. But we don't really have a reason for why he knows that. And Ozpin just has this whole thing about him where he knows a lot of backstory with no real good reason for it. And he's obviously like he's a lot more powerful than what he has already been shown to be. Because Salem asked Cinder, did you kill Ozpin? And then Cinder is like, yes, I did. I did kill Ozpin. That was me. And then Salem says, what are you planning? Not talking to Cinder. I think Salem knows that Ozpin is still alive in some way, shape, or form, because I think she knows better than to believe that Cinder, even with the Fall Maiden's power, was actually able to defeat Ozpin. And another thing that reinforces this idea is that what is his name? Oscar. In this past episode, they run into, I can't remember his name.
I really don't remember his name either. But he was one of
it's one of the big four people that work underneath Salem. They run into him, and Ozpin says that this is someone from my past. Ozpin's like a big character. He was involved in the Great War, apparently. He knows all of this backstory for no real reason. And then he starts telling Oscar that, like, I had to deal with this same thing. Like, I went through the same confusion when it happened to me. And it's just like, whoa, whoa, whoa. So some soul has already been passed down before to Ozpin. And that's where this theory comes from.
My only thing is there was never established a connection between Oscar and Ozpin until this. So, like, does it just so happen to be this just happens to be the next person, like, that's in line and just was randomly chosen?
That's a good question.
Is there backstory that Ozpin knows Oscar somehow?
I have no idea. And like, especially before Volume 4 came out, this was a really, like, far-fetched theory of mine, and my friends didn't really, like, believe it. But as more and more things come out,
it's starting to make
just kind
more
of
and more
like,
sense.
Yeah, it's becoming a more reinforced theory. It makes a lot more sense. That is the question, though. That, like, does the power have to be, like, does he have to know the person? Or is there, if he does, then how does he know Oscar,
Yeah. But we all knew, like, the minute that we saw Oscar, I think it was in the very first episode, they kind of showed a tad bit of him or whatever. Because we talked about this when that first episode came out, that Oscar's eyes immediately gave off, like, this is going to be an important character.
Yeah.
And now that we're back onto the eye subject, you can talk about Raven now that we're done with the whole theory that you have
Okay. So Raven and Ren actually have a connection that we don't know about really yet. We know that Team Ranger, they went to, in chapter 2 of Volume 4, they went to this place called Shion, and it had been attacked, right?
Mm-hmm.
By bandits, and then after the bandits, attack, the Grimm set in, and then all of that good, fun stuff. And Ren, as Team Ranger, goes to all of these places that have been attacked, are like the same thing happens over and over again. He's like, what did he say specifically? He said the same thing that always happens after, I think, Jean asked what happened.
Yeah.
And then
he brushes off the dust.
And then someone says, he brushes off the dust, and then I think either RWBY or Jean say the Grimm.
I think it was RWBY.
And then Ren says, not just anyone. And RWBY is like, one? So Ren is not talking about Grimm. He's talking about people. And when they go to Shion in chapter 2, the huntsman who eventually dies was like, these bandits came in and attacked. Well, later on, I can't remember what episode it was because we didn't cover it today, and I kind of wish that we had. When Crow meets up with Raven, Raven is a part of this tribe where weakness is frowned upon and the weak die and the strong live.
Survive, yeah.
And somewhere in that conversation, Crow mentions, like, the people from Shion. And Raven is like, well, they kind of had it coming. They were weak. And so I think these bandits and this tribe of people that Ren and his, whatever he's been dealing with, because obviously Ren, we haven't really talked too much about that within this past episode. We kind of only just saw where he came from, but he's probably dealt with these people before. I think Ren and Raven are actually against each other, and that his people keep getting attacked by Raven's tribe.
Yeah, I can kind of see how they would connect, and there's a lot of things. Like, we only watched past 4 episodes. If we had went back and actually
Hmm.
watched what you wanted to, there's so much that we still probably have missed.
Yeah.
Like there in RWBY, there's a lot of context clues and foreshadowing.
And when you watch through this show, there's a lot of things, and I understand that, this is still not like one of the best shows out there, because obviously like it's a new thing where uh Rooster Teeth isn't like that big of a name. They are, but like as far as the internet is concerned, they're not really like that big of a name outside of that. So you would think that the show can only do so much, and especially when you see the first couple seasons, the animation, they can only do so much. But actually, this show is incredibly well written, and there's
Mm-hmm.
a lot of like hidden things that you don't see in a lot of anime that Rooster Teeth just pulls off really well. And you can't just the show is not about just seeing something and taking it for face value. Because when we first watched the first episode of this season, the whole Oscar gets introduced,
Yes.
and I remember everyone in my group except for one person was like, "Oh yeah, we're definitely going to see this character again. He's really important to the story." Uh, and then I'm pretty sure it was David or someone was like, "No, I think it was just like a good transition." And we get to like see they made some excuse, and like looking back on it, it was like no. And one of the big things about that was his eye color. The show is all about the eye color of the characters.
Yeah. That's what I'm saying. Is like, and even with when RWBY started out or whatever, and to where it's at now, they've kept the same story for the most part. I think it was from volume 2 to volume 3. Um, it kind of fell apart because of one reason, and that reason being that the original creator, Monty Ohm, had passed away. And I feel like I've talked about this with you before, Joesby, but like at the end of volume 2, you see Yang, and she ends up seeing Raven.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
that's how they end volume 2. And then volume 3, it like they don't really talk about it too much.
It okay. It was a rough transition, but I think they did a really good job of actually continuing the story, even though the original creator wasn't there. And maybe he had already written this far ahead. We don't know.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe the RWBY team is coming up with new things and like trying to connect the story as well as they can, and still making it as if this was the original creation. But honestly, they connect it. It was a rough transition, but they go from Team RWBY being on that train and getting back to Vale, and Beacon. Uh, they get back to Beacon, and obviously there's this huge fight, but once that's over, they go into the whole tournament thing. And then Crow shows up during this whole thing. And when Crow goes to talk to Yang by himself, he actually brings up Raven again. And he's like,
It's been a little bit since I've seen that,
I
so
don't
I couldn't
remember the
honestly quote
yeah,
it. Yeah.
I can't quote it, but basically, um, the whole thing with that was that was Raven saving Yang that one time, because obviously, as we've seen recently, Raven is not the person, even if Yang is her daughter, to save someone who she deems weak.
Mm-hmm.
And they do, and I thought it was. I didn't notice the first time I watched it, but like when I went back and rewatched it, they do make the connection that from the train scene to like later on in the series, that Yang and Raven still have this connection, and now it's being, even more vital to the story.
All right. Well, I'm going to talk a little bit about this new episode again. The newest one,
Okay.
which is, I believe it was chapter 10. I'm going to keep questioning that because I'm not. It was chapter 10 or 11.
Yeah, this past one is 10.
Past one's 10? Okay.
Yeah.
I'm sure you noticed, but when they're explaining Ren's backstory and whatnot, and they kind of show a little bit of it, did you notice that, like, the weapons that had been given to Ren and Nora are the weapons that they still have now, basically?
Yes. It was beautiful the way they did that.
It is very cute, because, like, I don't know what the hell that type of blade would even be called, but that's, like, the blades that are at the end of Ren's guns.
Mm-hmm.
That blade that, again, spoilers, that his father gives him before his father basically sacrifices himself to make sure Ren gets out, is the blade that he keeps on his weapons. And it would make sense that Ren really doesn't want to go back to, if I remember correctly, the place is called Kuro Lily or whatever, or Kuro Yuri.
Yeah.
It makes sense that he doesn't want to go back. That is very traumatizing. That's something that you would probably want to try and forget.
Mm-hmm. And I like that that's traumatizing to him. Even with his semblance that would keep him calm, now that we know that, it's still good, character development to keep him from wanting to go, back to a place that's scarred him so deeply.
Because, yeah, that past episode was a very emotional and dark episode, especially trying to explain, like, it goes from, you see how Nora is basically, I don't know if she's, like, homeless or what the deal was with that. I'm not entirely for sure. But she was basically just scrapping. She was just scrapping for food, and people are bullying her. And then you have Ren, who his entire village gets attacked by Grimm. He loses his mother and his father. Like,
They have a really deep, really sad backstory.
Yes, they do. But I mean, I feel like in most animes, if you're going to make it good, tragedy is a key element to a great story. At least that is my opinion.
You have to make the viewer feel for the characters.
Yeah.
And then, like, in some instances, you make the viewers care for the characters, and then you rip the character out of the show in the most tragic way possible, and that just makes it worse.
I feel like you're hinting at something.
Well, I don't know what you're talking about. Oh.
But his past episode was very good. And I'm glad.
It was so good.
I'm glad that we got to know more about Ren, because I feel like the minute that everybody saw Ren and how quiet he kind of was, more people wanted to know about him.
Well, and that's the thing, right? Like, Ren has always been this really strong, really great character that nobody really, like, paid much attention to because he's so quiet. But if you go back and rewatch Volume 1, when they first get to Beacon and they're first, like, thrown into the forest, Pura is explaining things to Jean because, Jean is a newbie and he doesn't know what he's doing and he doesn't know how to fight. But Pura is explaining the whole aura thing to him, and while she's talking, it is showing a clip of Ren fighting this Grimm by himself, and you see him use his aura. And after I rewatched that, like, it was very clear to me that Ren was a super powerful character that has mastered his aura and is just really strong in general, and he's a great fighter. and he's just kind of this hidden thing, like this hidden character that hasn't really been brushed over until, this past episode, until just recently. And I'm so glad we finally got some story on him, and we finally get to know what his ability is, and all of that good stuff.
This is one thing I'm hoping that doesn't happen, because I've seen this in other animes too, where people want to know more about a character, and then the animators and creators or whatnot give what the people want. But then you have those people who don't want that, and then that character starts to fall off. And I'm really hoping that Ren doesn't become that people want to know who Ren is, but because they're showing more of him, people are going to start going, oh, well, we don't want to know anything about him now, because now we're pissed off that we didn't get what we want.
I don't think so.
You gotta remember, though, that trying to please everyone is nearly impossible.
Yeah.
People would want to know Ren's backstory. I think everybody did. Now that it's been explained, my question is the people going to like his backstory, or are people going to complain about saying, oh, it's too dark, this shouldn't be it?
No. I think RWBY really started getting dark as a show, of course, during the end of season 3, and I think it's going to continue to be that way.
It's being more serious and in-depth, which I'm appreciating a lot more than... Because, if you ask me, personally, there's a lot of people that are like, oh, yeah, I like season 1 over season 2, blah, 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 saying the original is better. I am liking this season much more than any of the other past seasons.
Yeah.
Because they have stepped up their story, they have stepped up the animation, everything is just much better now.
Yeah. Season 1 and Season 2 were really just... Even Season 3, to a point, were really just, setting up. And that's, a lot of episodes. That's a long time for you to quote-unquote set it up. But, I mean... We hadn't even, touched on Salem until the end of Season 3. So I think this is where things are actually getting super good. And characters are starting to develop more, and plot is just, rising dramatically. It's wonderful.
Yeah, you gotta appreciate RWBY's storytelling. It's done well.
Mm-hmm.
Though
I think we have a lot to look forward to.
Yeah. Is there anything else that you want to talk about? Or you think you've covered most of it?
I mean, there might be something that I missed, but yeah, I think we covered a lot of the main key points here.
All right. Well, I think that's where I'm going to call it, because that was a good about 30, I want to say 30 minutes, 20, 30 minutes of recording.
Yeah.
And honestly, it's going to be just nothing but a raw file that I'm going to have to try and put music to, maybe throw in some pictures for, for example, we talk about certain characters like Tyrion. That's a newer character, so not many people are going to maybe remember his name. So I might just throw in a picture of Tyrion, and then people will understand.
Yeah, or pictures from specific scenes that we talked about.
Exactly.
Yeah, that makes sense. And I think I'm pretty sure you want to keep doing this, so
I'm gonna try and covered make it a lot of, if I can.
Yeah, I think we covered a lot of the big things that we haven't been able to voice previously, and that once we get into the later episodes, this kind of thing will be a little bit shorter, and we'll just cover the most recent stuff.
Yeah, because we had to cover quite a bit, given that I wanted to start this very late into the volume or season or whatever.
That's fine.
So like I said, I think I'm going to wrap it up here, and I'm going to try, as long as we can set up dates and whatnot, I'm going to try and make this as weekly as possible, like every Saturday or Sunday, perhaps, that this would be uploaded. And it's going to be open discussions, meaning that there is going to be spoilers every single time we do this. And
yeah, so if you're not following first, and you're just following what they upload on YouTube, probably give it a week before you watch these episodes so that you're actually caught up.
And trust me, I don't upload too much in between weeks and whatnot. So, you'll know when this video comes up and you can find it easily.
Yeah. All right.
Alright,
I guess we'll say goodbye.
Yeah, gotta do my awkward outro now. Normally, that's how I do
Okay.
my videos. I just try to make it very awkward and, brief moments of silence and then just go back to me talking, or even something like this where I'm trying to explain how I normally do my outros as an outro.
Oh no, I got you. Keep going.
Well, I mean, there's nothing else to say. That's it.
Bye.